All right, we have come to our final storyteller of the evening. You hear her more than you see her. 20-year Elmhurst resident who is an actor whose voice has been heard on untold hundreds of radio, television, and online advertisements from McDonald's, Toyota, and Coca-Cola all the way down to the Elmhurst trolley. She's floated on the airwaves for over a quarter of a century, and she says that her PhD in psychology has helped her be persuasive, but evidently not persuasive enough because her kids are not here in the audience this evening. As her teenage son put it, we hear quite enough of Mom's voice at home, thank you. We are excited to hear her voice and have her up here. Please join me and welcome to the stage, Mimi Black!
Mario, you realize this, you're a really tough act to follow. Thank you so much for that. And before I get to share my story with you for a few minutes, I want to get a chance to thank two people who made it possible for us to have these stories this evening. Scott and his intern, Sydney. We have learned so much from you both. And in large measure to you two, I realize that every single one of us in this room can tell our story. It may look hard, like we're getting up here and telling these amazing stories that are from another planet. All of you in this room have a really amazing personal story to share. And I encourage you all to take an opportunity with your friends, with your family, up here on the stage here at Elmhurst Public Library to tell your own stories. But talk to Scott first. He's got great ideas. So I'm glad that I can share a few minutes with you and send you on your way on this chilly evening by beginning my story with a sunny spring morning in 1994 in suburban Boston. The phone rang in the apartment that I shared with two other young women. And believe it or not, there was a time when the phone rang and it was for more than just you. And it was my mother calling me from a closet. Mimi, you're not gonna believe this. Your father has finally agreed to move out of Needham. I think my mom was telling me this from a closet because she figured if my father heard back the words that he had just said to her, he would take them all back. I didn't mean it, I didn't mean it. No, Mom, are you kidding? That's impossible. It was impossible for two reasons. The first, my father, Mr. I'm going to leave this house feet first, Andrew Picarello, was the very first full generation of Americans from his Italian family. They came over in dribs and drabs to Ellis Island at the beginning of the 20th century and made their way to Boston, where I grew up in a suburb of Boston known as Needham. The family acquired some land and they were farmers, and my father grew up in and out of 3 houses on a family compound in a little suburb of Boston. And as the years went on and property values increased in Needham, the family sold off more and more parts of the farm until it was just those 3 homes on that compound. And as the years went on, my father became the last Picarello in Needham. Even I moved away to that apartment that I had with 2 other young women. So that was reason number 1. It was remarkable that he was thinking about retiring down to Cape Cod with my mother, which he did. When I moved here, by the way, I had to learn how to stop saying the Cape, and I had to start saying Cape Cod, which I wasn't used to. The other reason why this was remarkable was the reason that I, of course, had to say to my mother on the phone, what's he gonna do with all of his stuff? Over the years, he had acquired stuff. So much stuff that when he got married to my mother, they lived in the 2nd floor apartment above my grandmother. If you can imagine being newly married and living above your mother-in-law. My father had filled the basement of the house where he grew up and then built a house only a quarter of a mile away from his family compound and filled it with more stuff. And my garage, my grandmother's garage, filled with stuff. From the pram that he was pushed in, the little wicker pram from when he was a baby, all the way up to all of the lead pipes from my grandfather's plumbing business on the side. He had everything. If my father lives, he's still with us, by two quiet credos. The first one is, never let the facts get in the way of a good story. And the other is, don't throw that thing away. It could come in handy someday. I think he has that sort of Native American but Italian Yankee spin. Instead of using all the parts of the buffalo, my father uses every part of the mop. Enter me, the on-site manager of my father's now 3-flat rental home. First floor where my father had grown up, which had been my grandmother's home, now filled with 3 young college students. Old Mrs. K on the 2nd floor, who had been there for longer than I could remember. And then me, on this dormer's squished, hotter than Hades, 3rd floor attic apartment, smelling of dust and natural gas. And I had actually never even been to old Mrs. K's floor or to the 3rd floor ever in my grandmother's house. And as my father's helping me push up the last piece of yard sale furniture, and dusting himself off and looking down at that little square of the linoleum that, was kind of sticking up, using his hip to close this silverware drawer that never seemed to stay closed, he said, okay, so I think you'll be fine here. Here's the key to the front door and the back door. And, if you hear any bumps or creaks or anything in the night, don't worry about that. That's just kakaval, so you'll be fine. Kaka who? Kakaval, the indentured servant. His ghost is still walking up. He lived in this apartment, so you'll be fine. Good night. Excuse me? Allow me to explain. Mama Ran, who was the matriarch of my father's family, his grandmother. Mama Ran, the only one who had any money whatsoever, in part because she was a bootlegger and, into prohibition. She could swear and count money in English, and that was about it. She had indentured servants, and she would pay for their passage in the boat from Italy over to America in exchange for them working on the farm. And evidently, Kakaval, who was the last of her indentured servants, my father still remembered having lived on the 3rd floor. So it was just me and Kakaval, and probably several thousand cobwebs. But there were some lovely things about this house, and one of the things that was terrific was this tiny little window where I had stationed my exercise bike. I could see the little garden that I remember helping my grandmother tend when I was little. She had this beautiful grape arbor with Concord grapes. Yes, I'm a New Englander. Concord grapes growing over it with these beautiful irises around the sides. Evidently, my great-great, I'll just add another great Aunt Louisa, when she came over from Italy, she brought not only her tomato seeds, but she brought these iris rhizomes. Evidently, there is something about irises that contribute to the soil for better grape growth, and better than Italians to know about this, right? So these were gracing now the Concord grape arbor. And every year she would go out and she would split them and put them in other places in the house. And as she got too old to do it, my father would do it. Of course, I would help my dad. And he would have me look down at where the irises had grown that prior year and say, see, they spread out like footprints. And if you don't split them every now and then, they get really cramped. They like to spread out. And every Memorial Day, these irises would bloom and they would smell like Concord grapes. It was remarkable. So it was all the harder when I told my dad that I was getting married to a non-Italian and I would be the last Figueroa in Needham after these generations. We had the first produce store in the town. It was hard to be the last one. I can see why my dad didn't want to do it. And he said, don't worry. He said, the property values in Needham, in my opinion, they totally pulled the hen's tail. We'll be able to sell the house, and who would want the house? It's all that history, and it'll be fine. So he sold it. He moved all of his stuff. It took him 25 pickup trucks full of stuff before the day the moving trucks came. You think I'm stretching the truth here? I would never let the truth get in the way of a good story right now. That's true. He sold the house to a lovely realtor who assured him it would be in good hands. And within 1 hour, she had sold it to a developer. And they built 12 townhomes on it. I don't know just how many. But as I was moving out my stuff, knowing that the house would be knocked down, I was encouraged just to leave all the doors open and the windows open, and there was nothing to steal. That people even took the glass doorknobs. Remember those from the 1920s, right? It's beautiful. Back when wood was actually wood doors and glass. I left the back door over the cracked concrete back staircase open, and I looked up and I said, "Kakava, vieni qui. You're free to go. Paid your debt. Buona fortuna, paesano." I don't go by that house, those 12 townhomes. I haven't been there since they knocked it down. Neither is my dad. And I don't think either one of us ever will. But I'll tell you one thing. We have the Irises. And here in Elmhurst, not only do I have the Irises, but so does Debbie, so does Mark, so does Sheila, so does Diane, so does Yukari, so does Patricia. And just on your walk sometime, around Memorial Day, here in our town, if you stop suddenly and say, "I think I smell Concord grapes." You're not crazy. They grow footprints. And if you don't split them every now and then, they grow cramped. But oh, they smell beautiful. And I stop anybody who stops in front of my house. Concord grapes, right? Let me tell you why they smell that way.